October 2018, and a new shocking report says that maybe the extinction of the human race might be a lot sooner than we think. I think, therefore, I Am Flix presents a new movie on this shocking topic, The Climate Crisis from Unfettered Greed, as we explore the different ideas of just what is behind this. Now let's look at 1968 and Apollo 8. I had the great pleasure of working on the Apollo project navigation system.
This is Apollo 8 coming to you live from the moon. The vast loneliness up here on the moon is awe-inspiring, and it makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth. The Earth from here is a grand oasis in the big vastness of space.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty. You got a color film, Jim? Hand me a roll of color quick.
Oh man, that's great. Where is it?
Quick.
Oh, I got it right. Oh, that's a beautiful shot.
From the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
Yes, we went to the moon, and yes, the Earth is not flat. We no longer live on the Earth that was there from 1968. Things have changed. As we see the Earth as it orbits this circle, this globe, we have to understand and look at things. Because you see, the world hasn't ended, but the world as we know it has. We have to start taking a long look at some of the ideas of what climate change has done, and realize that climate change might just herald the end of humanity. It could be the end of the human race. But, you see, there are some people that greed is more important than humanity. They only care about themselves.
Science behind our understanding of man-made climate change is very, very old and very well established. So the task we've taken on is documenting this history to help us understand where we are, how we got here, and how we can change course. Scientists have known for more than 150 years that carbon dioxide was a greenhouse gas.
Fourier came up with this notion that there were gases in our atmosphere that allowed sunlight to pass through like a window, but then when sunlight bounced off the Earth's surface, they trapped the heat in, right? So you had now this establishment of what we now call the greenhouse effect.
In the 1850s, John Tyndall made laboratory measurements of the absorption of heat radiation by carbon dioxide. And he concluded that if you change the CO2 in the atmosphere, it's going to affect the planetary energy balance.
Tyndall was the one who really came along and proved that carbon dioxide was a natural thermostat that helped set our planet's temperature.
In the late 1800s, it was the great Swedish chemist Arrhenius who first did the calculations about what would happen as we, as he put it, evaporated our coal mines into the air. But people didn't pay much attention to that in the 20th century because we were too busy figuring out cool new ways to burn fossil fuel. It was only in the late 1950s that we even bothered to measure to see if it was accumulating in the atmosphere. That instrument, which went up on the side of Mauna Loa in Hawaii, is the most important scientific instrument in the world. Beginning in 1959, it found that there was a steadily accumulating amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, the so-called Keeling curve.
The Keeling curve is one of the most important pieces of scientific work of the 20th century that shows us that carbon dioxide has been rising continuously and systematically since the Industrial Revolution.
Keeling didn't just show that there was an increase in carbon dioxide, he also pinpointed the source. And what Keeling showed so incredibly was that roughly 1 out of every 4 CO2 molecules in our atmosphere today were put there by us.
Just a year ago, we passed 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, the pre-industrial level was about 280 parts per million. So human society in the industrial era has raised the level of CO2 in the atmosphere by about 40%, and many people fear that before we're done, we're going to double it or even triple it.
We're pumping CO2 into the atmosphere at a speed which we have never seen before in modern human history. We are absolutely racing into uncharted territory.
In our lifetime, human beings left behind the Holocene, this 10,000-year period of benign climatic stability that coincides with the rise of human civilization.
I've been trying to tell this story for 30 years, and the dominant experience I've had is seeing the new evidence come in, at first month by month and week by week. Now there are studies every day practically, and it just keeps getting clearer and stronger.
America's on the verge of technological breakthroughs that will enable us to live our lives less dependent on oil. And these technologies will help us be better stewards of the environment, and they will help us to confront the serious challenge of global climate change.
Now to a new report on global warming from a prestigious panel of scientists convened by the UN. The findings are blunt. Climate change is happening. It will lead to tremendous changes around the world that could have a very negative impact on the well-being of people, animals, and entire ecosystems.
The evidence is sufficient that we should move towards the most effective possible steps to reduce carbon loading of the atmosphere.
I think we have to accept the view that scientists have, that there is global warming and that human operation, human condition contributes to that.
I think the risks of climate change are real, and that you're seeing climate change. I think human activity is contributing to it.
Why has it taken so long, Senator?
Special interests. It's a special interest. It's the utility companies and the petroleum companies and the other special interests. They're the ones that have blocked progress in the Congress of the United States and in the administration. That's a little straight talk.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
I believe that climate change is real.
It's not just a greenhouse gas issue. It's a national security issue. We have an obligation to future generations to take action and fix it.
The Senate is going to do something today, beginning a debate on global warming, a comprehensive bill to deal with climate change that is favorably reported out of a Senate committee.
The yeas are 48, the nays are 36. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
At this point in history, most people, most scientists agreed that farming oil would end the global warming, not to have to dig for fossil fuel.
I believe that man's activities certainly can be contributing to the issue of global warming, climate change. Here in Alaska, the only Arctic state in our union, of course, we see the effects of climate change more so than any other area.
I think most members think that the climate change is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. The question is, how do you address it? And we've never gotten into the debate and the discussion about the consequences of trying to deal with it.
We need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. So I ask this Congress to send me legislation that places a market-based cap on carbon pollution and drives the production of more renewable energy in America.
But then what happened next was a financial crisis, a major financial crisis in 2008. An incredible number of banks had failed and were closed. A major shift of power down to less than 1%. And these 1% of the people were all profit over people, cared more about profits than they did about people. All of a sudden, corporations started thinking more about profit, less about people. And this was a major problem, as all of a sudden the ideas of farming oil were thrown away. Because big oil and all of its refineries and all the different criminals and evil people who have this got into the act. And there would be a major power shift in the finances of the world if we took away the drilling oil and started to farm oil.
Special interest. It's a special interest. It's that utility companies and the petroleum companies and the other special interests, they're the ones that have blocked progress in the Congress of the United States and in the administration. That's a little straight talk.
The tyranny of big oil, how it has twisted, lied, cheated. Big oil's conquered the world, put us all at risk and put our environment at risk. Profit over people, profit over the planet, profit over anything.
Evil big oil.
Evil big oil started to care for itself and by itself, and started to put ideas of profit at any cost, any cost. And the ideas of a climate were thrown away. The ideas of oil and the profits that could be made, and people wanting more and more and more, started to accelerate.
A sweeping climate change bill that's a top item on President Obama's agenda passed narrowly in the House of Representatives last night.
Only 8 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote with most Democrats for the bill. 44 Democrats joined most Republicans in voting against it.
Stolen emails from top researchers were posted online. Global warming skeptics saying those emails suggest that scientists may have worked together to manipulate global warming data. Defenders say those emails are being used out of context.
President Obama has said that people are justified in being disappointed by the outcome of the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference last week. In an interview on U.S. television, Mr. Obama acknowledged that nothing had been done to achieve a significant cut in greenhouse gases. But he said that the non-binding agreement reached in Denmark was better than nothing.
Top U.S. scientists urged drastic action today to slow global warming. For the first time, the National Academy of Sciences called for a specific change in climate policy. It recommended a carbon tax on fossil fuels or a cap-and-trade system for greenhouse gas emissions.
Senate Democrats pushed the climate bill off the table and into a very uncertain future ahead of November's midterm elections.
And I'll take dead aim at the cap-and-trade bill.
The Republican takeover of the House is likely to change the political climate on the issue of global warming.
And it is safe to say that the president's cap-and-trade legislation, that whole idea, is virtually dead.
House Republicans say they will scrap the Select Committee on Global Warming. Speaker-designate John Boehner called the panel, quote, a forum to promote Democrats' job-killing national energy tax, also known as cap and trade.
But when you have over 90% of the world's scientists who have studied this, stating that climate change is occurring and that humans play a contributing role, it's time to defer to the experts.
Listen, when you make comments that fly in the face of what 98 out of 100 climate scientists have said, when you call into question the science of evolution, all I am saying is that in order for the Republican Party to win, we can't run from science.
There was still some people holding on to the idea that we could grow our oil rather than dig for it.
Special interest. It's a special interest. It's that utility companies and the petroleum companies and the other special interests, they're the ones that have blocked progress in the Congress of the United States and in the administration. That's a little straight talk.
The tyranny of big oil, how it has twisted, lied, cheated. Big oil's conquered the world. Put us all at risk and put our environment at risk. Profit over people, profit over the planet, profit over anything. But big oil money controls the news media and controls the politicians.
The science is not settled on this. And I tell somebody, I said, just because you have a group of scientists that have stood up and said, here is the fact, Galileo got outvoted for a spell.
My view is that we don't know what's causing climate change on this planet, and the idea of spending trillions and trillions of dollars to try and reduce CO2 emissions is not the right course for us.
The White House today finalized new gas mileage standards that would eventually double the fuel efficiency of new cars and trucks to an average 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025.
Obama can't get through climate change legislation, so the EPA is going to use its authority to do what it can in that regard.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans. And to heal the planet
My promise is to help you and your family.
74% of U.S. Senate Republicans publicly question the science of global warming.
But this is a challenge that does not pause for partisan gridlock. It demands our attention now.
The age of the dinosaurs was dramatically warmer than this is right now, and it didn't cook the planet. And in fact, life was fine.
Are you convinced that climate change is man-made?
Well, I don't know that that is a resolved issue in science today.
You do not think that human activity, the production of CO2, has caused warming to our planet?
I do not believe that human activity is causing these dramatic changes to our climate the way these scientists are portraying it.
Do you believe in man-made climate change? Democrats, 83% say yes. Republicans, 36% say yes. It is now more divisive than abortion.
It has in recent years become ideology. It's become partisan.
We can see a big difference in the amount of oil company donations from Republicans and Democrats.
Red states, blue states. There are no red states and blue states. There's only the United States of America. That's what we're about. That's why I say you can't spend $200 million on a campaign and not be owing people something. And the next thing you know, they have to deal with the special interests. The next thing you know, they're doing special favors for special people and not dealing with what you need. They have to deal with oil companies, chemical companies, drug companies, and they owe them. And in the process, people get neglected. The poor have no advocate because the poor can't afford a lobbyist. The Statue of Liberty says, give me you're tired, you're poor, not you're wealthy, you're gifted, and you're endowed.
The Obama administration has just rolled out a new rule to cut carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. The proposal from the Environmental Protection Agency cuts CO2 emissions by 30% by 2030. Some Democrats in coal mining states want him to hold off until after the midterm elections in November.
The world's top climate panel has issued its direst appeal to date on the need to stop global warming. In a new report, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says continued emissions of greenhouse gases will cause further warming and long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system, increasing the likelihood of severe, pervasive, and irreversible impacts.
Scientists report that 2014 was the hottest year in recorded history for the planet, and that dates back to 1880.
Satellite data demonstrate for the last 17 years there's been zero warming, none whatsoever.
We are seeing these horrible the reports are now in Palmyra. They're executing people and leaving their bodies in the streets. Meanwhile, the President of the United States is saying that the biggest enemy we have is climate change.
We've had one record-setting year after another as far as the heat on this planet. So
I don't buy that, Joe.
What do you mean you don't buy it?
I just don't buy the fact. I don't buy the fact that it's a crisis. I don't buy the fact that it's a crisis. I just don't.
What?
I think that there'll be little change here. It'll go up. It'll get a little cooler. It'll get a little warmer, like it always has for millions of years. It'll get cooler. It'll get warmer. It's called weather. I think it's a big scam for a lot of people to make a lot of money.
In my first inaugural address, I committed this country to the tireless task of combating climate change and protecting this planet for future generations. 2 weeks ago in Paris, I said before the world that we needed a strong global agreement to accomplish this goal. An enduring agreement that reduces global carbon pollution and sets the world on a course to a low-carbon future. A few hours ago, we succeeded.
The question now, is this agreement just paper, or will it lead to crucial steps needed to make it something truly historic?
Feeling the heat? So is planet Earth. Federal scientists announced today that 2015 was the warmest year on record, with land and ocean temperatures nearly 2 degrees above average.
A major setback tonight for President Obama's climate change initiative.
The U.S. Supreme Court stepped in to put the centerpiece of President Obama's climate change agenda on hold, pending the outcome of judicial appeals in the lower courts.
Trump's statement comes just a couple days after he released his first energy plan. He says he would, quote, cancel the Paris climate deal and promote more fossil fuels in the United States.
Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
Please, we cannot keep sending climate deniers and defeatists
to Congress or state houses, and certainly not to the White House.
And then in history, it looked like evil big oil rigged the election, or definitely influenced the election, to get Trump elected.
NASA and NOAA scientists today declared 2016 the hottest year on record.
Out of the 17 hottest years on record, 16 have occurred since 2000.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. Thank you.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel called it extremely regrettable. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called it disheartening. And the Vatican went further, saying Mr. Trump's decision was a disaster for everyone.
Meanwhile, President Trump is ending Obama's signature environmental policy that limits carbon emissions from power plants that burn coal. Speaking to an audience in Kentucky yesterday, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt said that the regulation violated federal law and declared that the war on coal is over.
2017 was the third warmest year on record. The 6 hottest years have all been since 2010.
The window of opportunity to prevent global climate chaos is not yet closed. But according to a landmark report, it will require action on an unprecedented scale.
The message is over to governments at this stage. We've told you the scientific facts, the evidence, the costs. It is up to the governments now to decide what to do with it.
Special interest. It's a special interest. It's the utility companies and the petroleum companies and the other special interests. They're the ones that have blocked progress in the Congress of the United States and in the administration. That's a little straight talk.
The tyranny of big oil, how it has twisted, lied, cheated. Big oil has conquered the world, put us all at risk, and put our environment at risk. Profit over people. Profit over the planet, profit over anything. The more money that big oil had, the more power. And the more power, the less likely that people would get things. Evil big oil started to really take more and more power as trillions of dollars went unreported from income tax and massive needs for oil, and everybody was told to look away from growing oil for natural energies.
The Arctic Ocean is heating up at a much faster pace than the rest of the Earth. Temperatures over parts of the Arctic will increase as much as 54 degrees Fahrenheit this month in comparison to previous decades. The scientists who write for the Arctic News blog warn humans could become extinct by the year 2026 if climate initiatives are ignored across the globe. RT's Brigida Santos has the story for us from Los Angeles. Brigida, what's causing such a staggering increase in Arctic temperatures?
Simone, what's causing this is a variety of different types of feedback. Now, for example, when there is a lot of snow and ice, what happens is sunlight reflects back into the atmosphere. But as ice and snow begin to melt, we see the water increasing in temperature because it's absorbing more sunlight. And what this does is it causes temperatures to get closer between the Arctic and the equator. As a result, wind and storm patterns change, as can the direction of sea currents, which only works to pull warmer water and air into the Arctic. And this further heats up temperatures. The most dangerous thing about all of this is that it actually causes methane to escape from the Arctic seafloor into the atmosphere. And that's because carbon is usually absorbed and stored in frozen soil. But as that soil melts, methane is able to escape. And because carbon dioxide emissions don't reach their greatest impact for 10 years after they're released, we've really yet to see these effects. And all of this feedback could raise the global temperature 18 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, all by the year 2026. So without climate action, scientists are now warning that, quote, within just 1 decade, the combined impact of extreme weather, falls in soil and air quality, habitat loss, shortages of food, water, shelter, and all of the basic things we need to sustain life can threaten most, if not all, life on Earth with extinction. Now, at the end of 2016, temperatures at the North Pole were 8 times higher than average temperature increases across the globe. And this month, in February, the forecast shows that parts of the Arctic Ocean ocean will be 54 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they were between the years 1979 and 2000. And this is something that is shocking for an area of the world that doesn't get a lot of sunlight at this time of year, Simone.
It really is shocking, Brigitte. Okay, so we have a clear problem here. Now we need a plan. Do scientists recommend anything?
They do. So, of course, they recommend international climate action, much like the Paris Agreement. However, the problem with that is that at the end of last year, global temperatures were well over the 2.7 degree Fahrenheit guardrail that were set by the Paris Agreement. So the scientists here at the Arctic News blog, who are covering this topic extensively, say that individual nations, states, and governments really need to do their part in setting their own parameters and guidelines for controlling greenhouse gases. They're also talking about implementing something similar to a carbon tax, which they call a feed-bait system. These would be fees that are added to products known to pollute the earth that would then go into cleanup projects. So that's something that they are recommending in order to lower the temperatures and prevent us from an extinction by 2026, Simone.
9 years, not too far away. RT correspondent Brigitte Santos, thank you.
And if we look into the future, 2020, wars will break out over some of the conflicts and some of the different stupidity as an uneducated public starts to turn away from ideas of critical thinking and starts to develop hatred towards each other. You see a war is being fought in many countries because of a very rare resource, water. And this is starting to have problems. This is an idea of a possible future. You see, because climate change will devastate the world and make things problematic. So by the year 2034, it could be a World War III that might be before or after. Human population could dwindle. Rich people might hunker into their little bunkers as the rest of us are all part of a planned genocide. So maybe that's what they have in mind. You see, remaining human life forms suffering and dying, looking for water, looking for resources, looking for compassion, where compassion doesn't exist. Let's learn about critical thinking so that we can improve our lives and improve our world.
Rank and order, as you see it, the greatest challenges facing the United States: Russia, China, radical Islam.
Well, I think radical Islam right now is, and I feel that's the greatest. And again, we have a president who refuses to use the term, but radical Islam is, I'll tell you the one thing I know isn't, is global warming. That's the one thing. No. That's the one thing I know isn't.
Well, Donald Trump wants to fuck the facts. He doesn't want to believe in science. He thinks he knows more. But if we take all the experts in this, we're going to see that the vast majority of the experts know that fossil fuel is what is the problem, and that this is increasingly creating a problem of deaths, sickness, disease. And of course, our friend Donald Trump doesn't see it. He thinks climate change is a hoax. The evil ultra-rich is really what's hurting people. That's the big problem. And if we farmed our oil, we could end global warming. But, you see, Mr. Trump received all kinds of donations from the energy people, from the oil people, and the friends Russia, who really helped him to get elected. Russia's heavily invested into fossil fuels. First thing that Trump did was to end the Transparency Act so that people could make money. Then he also decided to have a bill that would allow coal mining pollution. You see, the fossil fuels is something that really big oil, they're behind Trump. They manipulate him. The evil ultra-rich manipulate him by schmoozing his ego and by talking about money. But intelligent-wise critical thinking, we know that we should not gargle arsenic, juggle nitroglycerin, play with poisonous spiders, or deny human-caused climate change. This is the epitome of stupid. We need to recognize, you see, Donald Trump is selling saws to these people. And he's providing his own advice, and he doesn't really see the future. The more mature a person is, the further they can see into the future. This is part of critical thinking, be able to see the future consequences of today's actions. And Donald Trump had to even give a warning to the Prince Charles, who wanted to give a warning about global warming. And Donald Trump can't hear it. So learn about critical thinking. Look at the facts, look at the future, look at the consequences of today's action, and develop critical thinking. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And fossil fuel doesn't want to give up to growing oil. Not everyone in big oil is a criminal, but almost all the ultra-rich criminals are into big oil. Have you ever noticed that movie bad guys are almost always invested in some type of big oil? They have tankers, pipelines, transports, gas stations, something like this. Because, see, it's largely true. And when the hero wants to hurt them, what he does is blow up the big oil. You see, the mafia people, the ultra-rich, the evil ultra-rich, they invest in oil because it's an easy way for them to make money. And in so making, they actually hurt the planet. Dirty, polluted, expensive oil. The rest of us don't understand. It's time for us to wake up to the ideas of global warming, and to wake up and understand that the bad guys are invested in the oil. It's time for us to recognize that we cannot ignore climate change just because of profit. Profit, like many of these people. Profit cannot be used over people. Profit over people is evil, and evil in itself.
I'm an oil man. Ladies and gentlemen, I have numerous concerns spread across this state. I have many wells flowing at many thousand barrels per day. I like to think of myself as an oil man.
The world's first billionaire was an oil tycoon, and it started a chain. It started a trend. It started an idea that money could be made on big oil.
I hate most people. There are times when I look at people and I see nothing worth liking. I want to earn enough money I can get away from everyone.
Greed took over, and the ideas of climate protection and the planet people were lost in the way of profit.
You may have noticed his lifestyle has become increasingly lavish.
I've noticed.
This is a different species, counselor. It will rip out your liver and feed it to your dog.
Of course, we're not talking about the hardworking people working the oil rigs and doing all the work. We're talking about the ultra-rich people at the top, putting profit over people.
The point, counselor, is that you may think there are things that these people are simply incapable of. They are not.
Draws the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Don't bully me, Daniel.
Yes, the ultra-rich people who got into big oil started to do anything to preserve their profits.
I'm your friend. I'm not trying to hurt you. Never. Just survive.
Yes, every drug lord, criminal, kingpin, mafia boss, all of the evil rich are deeply invested in fossil fuel because there's massive amounts of profit here. Massive amounts of profit. And even Donald Trump has no clue about climate change. He's so into profit and profit over people. And all of the people who protest fossil fuel, they seem to get silenced or removed. We need to really take a look at it, because climate change really is true. It does threaten our existence on this planet. The ice caps are truly melting.
Another foot.
Another foot,
You better keep it to yourself.
Oh, of course I'll keep it to myself. Until the water reaches my lower lip, and then I'm gonna mention it to somebody.
Yes, it's time we mention it to somebody. In fact, we need to mention it to everybody, everybody you know. We need to be able to share and care, and dare to share and care. We need to be able to tell people climate change is real, and we need to go from a drilling oil, fossil fuel, into growing our oil, growing our energy. This is the only way we can save our planet. Biofuel is much cheaper, much cleaner, scrubs away the CO2, and would reverse this problems with global warming and the climate change threat. Definitely. We could see that it is definitely cheaper for grown oil, bio oil, but if we were to do this and resort to this, there would be a major shift in the financial power, and people don't want to give up that. But somehow or another we need to put people over profit. Eventually we have to wake up and get over evil big oil. We have to be able to fight against evil big oil and bring back ideas of science and stop the lobbying action and stopping the influence and stop evil big oil from destroying the planet, destroying humanity, all in the name of money, finances. To save the planet, we must do it.